Yeah, moving on to Everton then. That takeover could reportedly still happen this year. Friedkin's just got to clear the fit and proper tests. How likely is it that he passes in time for the new year?
Well, so if you looked at Sir Jim Ratcliffe's owners and directors approval, that took about 6 weeks, and that had Christmas in the middle of it. So we are this week in that sort of zone, that 6-week zone, for a credible owner to get owners and directors test approval, assuming that they put their application in 6 weeks ago. You would have thought that it was a relatively straightforward approval on the directors and owners test. There was some rumours, I don't know whether they're true, but there were some rumours that the FCA and FA approvals that were required actually have come through to Everton. Although I do think if the FCA one had come through, then we would have seen an announcement by the FCA of that approval. So I'm not 100% sure whether those rumours are true, but there shouldn't be any wrinkles from an owners and directors test or an FCA or a FA perspective. That I don't think should be the key issue that they face. I think the Leadenhall issue is probably slightly more complicated, the issue that's going on in the US. Whether that can be resolved in the timescale, I think is now looking unlikely. But I assume, given the work that seems to be going on in terms of looking for the new management team and the new chief executive, I would assume that they've got their heads around how that's going to play out, and that they are generally relatively relaxed about it, such that they think that they're going to take over imminently. I don't think you would, if it is true that they've appointed Nolan, and so Nolan Partners are a sports recruiter specifically looking at senior hires within football and other sports. And the signal that Friedkin have actually engaged them to commence a search process would seem to be confirmation that they think things are imminent. There was a lot of suggestion that Alina Sulauku, the outgoing Roma CEO, is going to come in at Everton. But if they are actually opening it up to a broader audience via Nolan Partners, that would suggest that actually maybe they've got a broader set of candidates in mind. Another one of them is Fulham's CEO, Alistair McIntosh, who used to be CEO of Manchester City before that. He's been at Fulham since 2008, so a very long time. Whether he wants to move back north, I think would probably be the one of the bigger issues in respect of Alistair McIntosh. Although, you know, there's no question that from an experience perspective, he can absolutely handle that situation. He's probably now one of the longest standing chief executives in the Premier League, if not the most longest standing. So, but you know, I don't know Lina Sulaku. I do know Alistair McIntosh, and I think he would be a good hire for Fulham. For Everton, in terms of the next phase of their progress under the new ownership. But it looks like he's slightly lukewarm on that from reading the press around it. So, but it all, I think all pointers are to Friedkin being serious and being close to the deal. So I would expect it to happen in December before Christmas. I think that there's likely to be funding issues right now as we come up to the November payroll in any event, and certainly in December. And so I think that they're going to be quite keen to have got the thing done so that they can deal with some of those issues, even if the Leadenhall situation in the US is not quite dealt with completely. But I think it's a case of watch this space, you know, next week, 10 days in terms of owners and directors test.
Yeah, for sure. Just on Friedkin and Roma, then he's got himself into a right mess with managers. He's hired Ranieri as the third boss this season. Do you think Everton fans should be concerned about his judgment?
Well, I wouldn't say about their judgment. I think Roma is a very big club. I think the bigger issue that Friedkin's got is whether it's feasible to own two major football clubs like Roma and Everton. and whether they can sit together in a football group, in a multi-club football group, because most of the groups that we've seen have a very clear parent club, and then a number of subsidiary clubs around Europe and the rest of the world. But most of them have been focused on having one very distinctly senior club. That's not the case when you've got Roma and Everton, and I think that will cause issues. I mean, Roma is a club that has, clearly it's in a very major city, but you're talking about a club where the fans are on, it's near constant radio, and there are radio stations that are only dealing with Roma fans all day long. There are Roma had to start off their own radio station just to start to have that kind of voice back into that market. They're not going to accept being second to Everton in terms of investment concerns and focus. So I think that's more of an issue on the Roma side. On the Everton side, look, the Friedkins are bound to have learned a lot of very useful stuff from their experience at Roma about how football works. So I would suspect that those issues that they've had at Roma are actually positive for Everton, in that it's going to teach the ownership group a lot about how to deal with problems going forward. And they did have a very good start at Roma. It's only that it's gone wrong recently, but we know there's no exact science in football. They've got to make as many good decisions as they can make. And I think they've obviously made a number of missteps in terms of the management that they've appointed into, and probably in terms of firing Mourinho when they did. I don't think Everton should be concerned. I think it's probably a positive that they've had that experience, but I do think that figuring out how to deal with two very major clubs within one group is quite a unique problem in MCOs.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the Everton new stadium apparently being considered for Ashes rugby. Then, how significant financially could that be for the club?
Probably not that significant, if I'm being honest. It's another match day, so that's good, but I doubt it's going to move the dial particularly. From what can it be worth? Maybe it's worth £1 million, maybe. Yeah. But I doubt it's worth much more than that. Certainly not bottom line. So, they'll have to. What they'll need to do with the new stadium is get more and more events using the stadium, such that it's not just about the 19 home games. You need to get as much business going through that stadium as possible, whilst also keeping the pitch in good condition and everything else. Clearly, rugby games are not going to help with that. So there's a limit to what you can do in that regard. And that it's not a situation, as I understand it. I'm pretty certain about this. It's not like Spurs, where they can roll out the stadium, the pitch, and bring in an artificial pitch. So you're naturally more limited where you've only got a grass pitch as to how many times you can put events on in that stadium. But look, every little helps, but it's not going to move the dial materially.